You are having a fabulous day, and in today's session of correlation and regression, we will be trying to figure out the opportunity which can make this day even more fabulous. Of course, in terms of the profit, in terms of making money. If we look at the price action so far in the major currency crosses involving the US dollar, we are seeing sideways trend prevailing. There has not been much of a movement on either side. The range has been established, and if we look at these price moves, these are happening within that range, 30 to 40 pips range. I think to be precise, it's somewhere close to 35 pips, the difference between the high and low. And now it is hovering closer to this lower range of this range. And in today's session, I'm not really expecting the price moves to be much volatile. We are likely to see this subdued momentum, subdued sentiments prevail in US session also, unless there is any big development which causes the flutter in the market. If we look at the USD, it has consolidated with slightly bullish bias. It has gained strength against most of the major currencies. That is also visible against the JPY. JPY has been one of the stronger currency in last couple of sessions, and if we consider the price moves of the USD JPY, it has declined after making this high just slightly above 132, closer to 133, and from there on it has corrected somewhat, and in today's session it seems to be trading flat. But if we consider these medium term charting, it is indeed having these higher highs and higher lows formation. So this time around it seems to be reversing from these immediate swing low. It hasn't really broken below these prior swing low, and in today's session it seems to be turning the corner after getting close to it. So immediate bias is slightly bullish. It is not overtly bullish, but slightly bullish. The dollar is having the upper hand against most of the major currencies, and that is also visible for the USD JPY. If we look at the GBP USD charting, the picture is slightly different. For the GBP, the session, particularly the European trading session, started quite well with the gains of around 70 pips from the lower levels to the higher levels, and on those higher levels it has opted for consolidation. It is not really going anywhere, neither it is declining nor it is rising much, and it is keeping up with this consolidation with slightly bullish bias. If we consider the medium term charting, it seems to be finding some support closer to the 1.20 range, and from there on it has bounced back after this continuous slide on the lower levels. So today we will have to try to figure out the opportunities in line with this current scenario of the consolidation. We can't really hope for big move, big break on either side. So in that scenario, all we can do is keep looking for the opportunities with lower range to be considered as the support and higher range to be considered as the resistance. So if we have to do anything in today's session, then that is to look or continue to look for the buying opportunity in the GBP USD as long as it holds above this immediate swing low of 1.204, and on the higher side we can look for the short sale also closer to this 1.21 range. Then we have to figure out which is the best instrument if we have to expect the dollar to continue to consolidate with the slight bias on the bullish side. In that scenario, we have to look for the most bearish currency against the dollar to go short and to buy the dollars. And if we feel that any particular currency is quite strong against the dollar, then we will also look for the buying opportunity, the long opportunity for that particular currency as well. So GBP is one such currency which is having better momentum compared to the other major currencies. But overall, the dollar is stronger for the day, slightly stronger. We can't really say a clear cut strength, but it is indeed having this momentum where it is finding support on the lower side. So let's figure out which is the most bullish and which is the most bearish currency to trade with in today's session. If we look at the timeline of the USD JPY, the JPY was having bias on the bullish side, but after finding support closer to these prior swing lows, the USD JPY has now started to rise again. That puts the JPY on the back foot, and we can't really be sure about its momentum being favorable for short sale. If we consider the Euro USD, the Euro USD is also seemingly finding support closer to this immediate swing low. So overall, we will have to play within the range, and I think in light of this charting, as I talked about, the GBP being the strongest currency of all the major currencies so far which we have seen, the GBP is going to be the best bet for going into a long trade if we expect the dollar to weaken further from here onwards, or maybe later in the day if we see further correction in the GBP towards the immediate swing low. In any of this scenario, if we expect the dollar to from there on weaken, then the GBP is seemingly the better placed of the three major currencies which we have seen so far. And if we have to go with the flow and trade with the dollar strength, then we have the USD JPY, which is seemingly a better instrument to trade with this climb towards immediate swing high. But for the euro, it is still some distance off from this immediate swing low, so that puts the JPY on the weaker footing compared to the euro. There is not much of a difference between these two. These are indeed difficult situation. This is a difficult situation to draw much of an inference from this consolidation phase. If we look at the Euro USD short-term charting, the price formation is of these higher highs and higher lows, and unless there is break below this immediate swing low, which can't really be too sure about this break on the lower side either. So for the time being, we have the JPY as the the bearish of the three major currencies, whereas GBP, the British pound, is the most bullish of the three currencies trading against the dollar. Now let's expand our horizon and include the other major currencies like AUD, NZD, CHF, and CAD. If we look at the AUD USD charting, it has continued to decline, and it has even now slided toward this Asian trading session low. It is still some distance away from that. Prior in the day, it was continuing to rise, and it did gain substantially, but it hasn't been able to sustain that momentum. And if we look at the hourly chart, it is of higher highs and higher lows from the medium term perspective. So in today's session, the AUD is also not going to be a first choice for going short. We can still keep looking for the opportunities to go long, but as I said, the GBP is seemingly a better bet for that kind of trade. And after that, these major currencies can be considered. And if we expect the dollar to weaken, we also have the opportunity which is presenting itself here around this GBP's level of 1.2075. There is the immediate swing low. So for next couple of hours, if we see it consolidating and not really breaking on the lower side, we can indeed take our chances. Let's consider other major currency of CAD. The CAD has now climbed above these immediate swing high, so that puts it as the most bearish currency of all the major currencies which we have seen so far. And if you expect the dollar to strengthen moving ahead, particularly after the start of the US trading session. In that scenario, you can give the first preference for buying the dollar against the CAD, as USD CAD has been able to successfully climb above this prior swing high, whereas for other major currencies that hasn't really happened yet. Let's consider the NZD. NZD is trading in line with its Asian peer of AUD. There is not much of a difference on the chart, and we still have to put it behind the GBP and Euro, but it is not as weak as CAD, which we saw just a while back. So that puts the AUD somewhere in the middle, with the GBP being the most bullish of all the major currencies and CAD being the most bearish of all the major currencies which we have seen so far. And let's consider the USD CHF now. USD CHF appears to be one of the stronger currency. It has not really declined towards the immediate swing low. It is now again trying to climb back into the equation, and it has even started to rise. So the USD CHF is again getting back towards the immediate swing low. So here we have the interesting scenario, interesting situation where most of the European currencies in particular are having better momentum against the dollar, with the GBP leading the pack. Its correction has been the shallower of all the major currencies, and in the rise it seems to be approaching towards the immediate swing high. And same thing can also be said about the USD CHF. It is also showing substantial movement in today's session, and it is not really far off from these immediate swing low. So you can put it along with the GBP. Only difference is that its correction was much deeper compared to the correction which we are observing for the GBP. So that difference aside, there is not much of a difference in terms of the timeline, but still, on account of this difference, I would prefer to trade with the GBP if we expect the major currencies to gain against the dollar moving forward. And as I said earlier, we have the momentum against the CAD. So even though other major currencies seems to be able to hold the ground and start to rise again slowly, the CAD has gone on to make this immediate swing high, which is higher above this prior swing high. Pardon me. So that makes it the bearish, most bearish of all the major currencies trading against the dollar in today's session. And as I said earlier, also we have the GBP as the most bullish of the major currencies. But there is no clear trending environment in today's session. It is more of an consolidation phase where the bias is tilted on the bullish side for the GBP and on the bearish side for the CAD. So you will have to trade accordingly while keeping in mind the range and how to exploit that range while taking into consideration the inherent bias of the currency cross which we are using. Now let's shift our focus to the equity segment. On the equity side, we have the formation of lower lows and lower highs. So for today's session, particularly after the start of the European trading session, the momentum has been bearish, and we have this formation which is showing a consolidation phase with the slight bearish bias. But if we look at this charting from the medium term perspective, you can see that the low had climbed towards this prior swing high in yesterday's session, then it gave up all of the gains, and again it climbed toward this swing high. So it is also a case of consolidation in this narrow range. It is not really going anywhere, and as the current momentum is slightly bearish, we can continue to keep the trading trajectory also similarly inclined, and we can continue to look for short selling opportunities unless there is any clear cut break above this immediate swing high. So that is the only thing which might change the picture in immediate term. Apart from that, we have to keep looking for the shorting opportunities as the Dow is consolidating closer to the higher point of the range. But before we can say we should short the Dow or buy the Dow, we have to consider the overall scenario while considering the other major equity indices for the US as well. For the S&P 500, things are looking slightly more bearish compared to the Dow Jones Industrial Average, but its medium-term trajectory is not really much different from the Dow Jones Industrial Average. For the Nasdaq, the situation is also similar, with it consolidating closer to this immediate swing high formed in the yesterday's session. Now let's consider the timeline of the swing high and swing low formation. In this case, the Nasdaq appears to be one of the weaker instrument with the slight bias on the bearish side in comparison to the Dow. And if we look at the S&P 500, it is more in line with the price trajectory of the Nasdaq. So we have the preference. The bearish decline is much more pronounced in the Nasdaq and the S&P 500 in comparison to the Dow Jones Industrial Average. So that is something which we can keep in mind. If the first move is on the lower side, particularly after the start of the North American trading session. In that scenario, we should go with the flow and keep looking for the opportunities to go short. But in Nasdaq or S&P 500, but if we get the break on the higher side, particularly above this immediate swing high, and things seems to be changing, then we have the Dow Jones Industrial Average, which we can go for a long trade also. So we have this slight difference in the price trajectory of these major equity indices for the United States, and keeping that in mind, we can make our trading choices in line with the price formation, particularly after the start of the US session, as then we will have much more clarity. If we observe the initial moves, we will get the clarity looking at that. So that's all from my side for today's session. Before we wrap up the session, let's take a glance on the European equity indices. Let's consider how things shaped up for the DAX and the FTSE 100. It's taking slightly more time. Okay, here also things were sideways with the slight bias on the bearish side. If we look at the medium term charting, it seems to be consolidating with this formation of higher highs and higher lows. So in today's session, we saw the support coming in for the DX on the lower side. And let's consider the FTSE 100. FTSE 100 is one of the best placed equity index in terms of the buying opportunity for adopting buy on dip strategy. So here we have this fresh swing high above the prior swing high that has not really been seen for other major equity indices. So if you have to go for a long trade in today's session, the FTSE 100 seems like a best idea to go with. And if you have to go for a short sell trade, then we have the Nasdaq and the S&P 500 going us giving us a much favorable probabilistic outlook. So that's all from my side for today's session, where we saw that in the currency space, GBP and CHF are strongly inclined to consolidate with the bullish bias, whereas the CAD is bearishly inclined. But the overall phase is of consolidation. Same undertone is also being observed in the equity segment. There is not much of an sentimental clarity. We have to try to exploit the situation while keeping the range in mind. Thank you all for joining in. Have a fabulous day ahead. See you next time around. Till then, goodbye.